So you're writing something and you need to do some character design, and that generates a lot of data per character. It depends a lot on what you're writing, of course, but depending on the type of story, you can have basic information, descriptions of appearance, personality, alliances, character histories, and a lot of world building related data as well. Maybe the languages they speak. This can add up to a lot of data, especially if you're dealing with an ensemble cast, maybe about 100 side characters, and especially if your genre is some variation of fantasy or possibly even sci fi. So, how do you store all that data? Well, one method is to store it in your head, but it doesn't work in the hypothetical scenario we discussed. It is perfectly fine for projects with less than, say, 10 recurring characters that you plan to finish at a stretch. And I do that myself, that kind of writing, especially is smaller projects, and sometimes I use it even when I don't finish it at a stretch. So sometimes it works. And there are bound to be writers who are better at it than I am, and if you are one of them, good for you. If you can't store it in your head, the next step up would be to use a notebook or a physical file. This is good too if you're good at indexing your papers and storing them back in their assigned location. And I used to do this as well, but a big problem with this that I discovered is the lack of portability, especially if you move around a bit or if you want to write in a place that's not your room, for example, and you want to refer to your notes. You'll find these notes are impossible to carry. And another problem is how prone they are to damage. For example, your dog randomly decides to snack on one of the character sheets, and now you don't know a character's surname. And another big problem with this is it's hard to get an overview of the data at a glance. Sure, you would be sorting by, say, a character number or by surname, for example, but if you want information by another metric, say alliances, then that won't be that easy. And also, edits can be a problem because sure, you can replace papers or you can use correcting fluid or tape or you can attach more papers to the papers you already have, but all of these can only do so much. And if you're an iterative world builder like me, that could become a problem very quickly. Also, you don't have to do this the old fashioned way, you could do this digitally. So basically, you can fill in your character details into a sort of format you built using Word or OpenOffice Writer or Google Docs, any other word processing file, for example. Or you could also use a spreadsheet. Just fill it in for each character and store it all in organized folders. And make sure you label them in a way that you can identify them or maintain an index file so that you know which file to look for when you're trying to find something about a character. This approach is pretty bad at giving you an overview, just like with physical files, but it solves a lot of the portability and damage issues. So it solves the damage issues provided you back it up regularly and obsessively. I would recommend doing that in any case because I've had some pretty bad experiences with, crashing hard drives. So always keep a backup and you don't want to learn that the hard way. Also, another advantage to using word processor files is that it's much easier to edit, though bulk edits can be a bit of a pain if you end up having to do bulk edits. And another possible issue you could run into is the amount of data used to store all of this, but unless you're attaching videos into them, it'll be a few kilobytes per file. And that's not going to add up to a lot, even with a lot of characters. And because the file size is not especially large, you might be able to back it up, just zip the entire folder and upload it to your cloud of choice. The next step up from there would be to use a database, that is, a database software or a cloud database. The thing with this is this might be a bit of a learning curve if you're unused to databases, but they're much better at actually organizing the data if you want an overview. So, say you want to sort your characters by height, you can sort your characters by height. That won't be a problem. A problem with this is you tend to have to set them up pretty well in the beginning, as making structural changes once your data is actually in the database can be a bit of a pain. But on the other hand, you also have a lot of choice in which database to use, be it something like Access, MS Office's Access, or a cloud based one. And Access is pretty good if you're not too familiar with databases and it's easy enough to set up. And there are also database options offered by OpenOffice and LibreOffice. They're a little bit more difficult to set up, but it's something you can learn fairly quickly. Or instead of going for an actual database, you could simulate the level of function with a spreadsheet, possibly. I've never actually tried it, but if spreadsheets are your thing, go for it. The main advantage to the database approach is data organization. So if you want to know the number of characters of a given nationality, you could just run a query or sort the table if you don't want the exact number. And also you can store and organize a lot of data and even build relationships between them if it helps you make sense of all the data essentially. For example, you could maybe store data about all the factions involved in your story, all the cities on the map, all the spells that your characters use, and so on, and link them possibly to the characters that use it. The next step up from a database would be to go for software built specially for writing with the ability to manage all associated data. It's probably safe to assume that purpose built software would be more user friendly and easier to learn for an amateur, and it would also solve a lot of data organization issues. But I haven't actually used any of these softwares, so I can't actually comment on the effectiveness. So if you have used them, do share your experience in the comments below. So those are some of the ways I could think of that you can use to store the data about your writing, essentially the character details plus world building details. So those are basically the methods I've used. And if you have other viable methods, do mention them in the comments below. That's it for now, and see you next time.